In 490 BC, Phidippides ran from Marathon to Athens to announce a Greek victory over the Persians. In 2025, I'm going to attempt to follow in his footsteps by running from Bath to Bristol and then back to Bath again. A total distance of 26 miles 385 yards, the distance that is now known all over the world as a marathon. And in true Cycling Nate style, I'm going to be doing this along an old railway trail. So come along with me as I suffer through this marathon and learn some of the history of this gorgeous railway trail. The marathon that I signed up for was the Bath and Bristol Railway Marathon, an event put on by Relish Running. It was really well organised and definitely an event I'd recommend. I chose this marathon because it uses an old rail trail from Bath to Bristol, and if you're an avid viewer of the channel, you'll know that I do love an old rail trail. The event also meant I got to explore the city of Bath, which is beautiful. I'd highly recommend a visit there. The marathon began in Green Park, just outside of Bath city centre, and next to the former Green Park railway station. The station originally opened in 1870, and back then it was called Bath Queen Square Station. It wasn't until 1951 that the station was renamed as Bath Green Park. The station was open until the 1960s, when it faced the Beeching Axe. It remained derelict until the 1980s, when it was redeveloped into a number of restaurants and also used as a market. After making sure myself and Mrs. Cycling Nate had everything we needed for the marathon and the half marathon that Mrs. Cycling Nate was running, we headed to Green Park to collect our bibs and get ready for the start. At 10:30 a.m. in the morning, after a race briefing and a warm-up, it was time to go. 14 weeks of training came down to this few hours that lay ahead. The marathon route begins by following the riverside path along the River Avon. A lot of the original track bed of the Bath to Bristol Railway here was redeveloped in the 1980s, so cyclists and runners alike need to use this riverside path to make their way to the edge of Bath before getting on the track bed proper. Here we pass under the original rail bridge that took the track from Green Park Station over the River Avon and towards the edge of Bath. It crossed the River Avon one more time before leaving Bath. That bridge is also still in place. This first one is used as an access road to Sainsbury's, whereas the second one is now derelict. After about 2 kilometres, I came to the end of the riverside path section of this marathon and had to do 500 metres on the road. It is a very quiet road, but be aware if you are cycling or running this, there isn't much pavement space and there isn't a dedicated cycle lane. You will need to go on the road for a good chunk of this before you make it to the start of the official Bath to Bristol railway path. With 2.5 kilometres down, I was still feeling very fresh and full of adrenaline from the start of the race, but ahead of me lay 19 kilometres of railway path to take me into Bristol, and the first 15 kilometres of this path are a mild drag uphill as we make our way to the outskirts of Bristol. This railway path crosses the River Avon 4 times between here and Bristol, and the first crossing comes just on the edge of Bath at 3.5 kilometres in. With less than a park run covered, I was still in high spirits and feeling good, and keeping up with my target marathon pace, which was 6 minutes 23 per kilometre, which would give me a finishing time just under 4 hours and 30 minutes. After heading across the River Avon another time, I passed through the 5 kilometre mark, still comfortably able to keep my marathon pace. From here on, I headed out into open countryside and towards Bristol along this beautiful railway path. This railway path was originally the Mangotsfield and Bath branch line. This was built by the Midland Railway Company in 1869, and it connected Bath to its main network in Bristol, where they had a Bristol to Birmingham line. This meant trains could run from Birmingham and then come on this branch line, head towards Bath, and head down a further line that they had all the way down to Bournemouth. At Salford, we cross over again the River Avon. I'm 8 kilometres in now and still feeling good and having no trouble keeping up with my marathon pace. In fact, I'm a little bit ahead of my target time here. I'm averaging 6 minutes 15 per kilometre, a little bit ahead of my 6:23 per kilometre target. Not long after crossing the river, we come across the Avon and Somerset Heritage Railway. And at around 10k in, I'm still feeling pretty fresh. Look how happy I was as I passed the camera here. The Avon and Somerset Railway is around 3 miles long and runs alongside the Bath and Bristol railway path. And just here we have a brand new station which wasn't originally on the line. This is the Avon Riverside station, built to allow people using the train to hop off at the end of the line and enjoy the area. Shortly after this, I crossed the River Avon for the last time as I headed towards Bristol, although I would be crossing it on the way back, with the heritage tracks running alongside the path. After another few kilometres, we come into Bitton Station. I was still feeling good here, but here we have to cross over the tracks and run on the north side of the heritage line before crossing over again a little further down the tracks. Fortunately, at both of these crossings, I wasn't confronted with any trains, so I was able to cross straight over and my pace wasn't held up. So at around 12 kilometres, I'm still just about under my marathon target pace of 6:23 per kilometre. The Avon and Somerset Railway comes to a halt at Oldland Common Station, and I carry on pounding the tarmac down a more regular railway trail, with no heritage railway running alongside now. At North Common, we come across the first road crossing since we've joined the track bed on the edge of Bath. But there is a pedestrian crossing here, and fortunately it was timed well by a marshal for me, so I was able to cross without losing any time. At around 15k in, we have another crossing, just after this beautiful signal box. Again, the crossing was timed nicely by a marshal, so I was able to head across without losing any pace, and enjoy looking at the wonderful Warmley station. This small station was opened on the 4th of August 1869, but closed to passenger traffic due to the beaching cuts on the 7th of March 1966. At this point, around 15k into the marathon, which is a total of 42.2k in kilometres, I was still feeling pretty fresh, and keeping my pace well below the 6:23 per kilometre needed to hit a 4:30 marathon. At this point I was actually at 6:14 per kilometre. However, not far from Warmley Station, the route starts to rise fairly steeply, as it rises up to cross over a couple of modern dual carriageways that have been built since the railway was closed. Here I did start to feel it in the legs a little bit, and started to wonder if I'd maybe started off a little bit too quick. Fortunately, the next 5 kilometres down to the turnaround point were a gentle downhill gradient, so I was able to pick up the pace again and carry on to the 21 kilometre mark quite comfortably. And to help me to that halfway point, I had a tunnel to look forward to. This is the Staple Hill Tunnel. This was built in 1834 and is 518 yards long. It was not built by the Midland Rail Company that built the Bath to Bristol line, and is part of a separate line that joined on to the Bath to Bristol line, hence it was built so early. It was quite nice running through the tunnel because it took me away from the sunshine and it was a little bit cooler in here, helping me to keep up with my marathon pace. At this point I'm still averaging 6 minutes 15 per kilometre. And I was able to keep up that pace for the first half of this marathon, setting a new half marathon personal best of 2 hours 11 minutes and 56 seconds. Averaging that pace of 6 minutes 15 per kilometre. Now that sounds great, a new half marathon PB, but should I really be setting that while running a full marathon? I think I might have gone out a little bit hard, and we'll see if I pay for that later in the marathon. The path here, being in Bristol, is a little bit busier than the more rural parts between Bath and Bristol, but considering this was a nice sunny Sunday morning, it really wasn't too bad. A very enjoyable path to run on, and I bet a really enjoyable path to cycle on. I'll definitely have to come back and do that sometime. The tunnel provided some welcome relief as I made my way back out to the outskirts of Bristol. This first 5 kilometres from the turnaround point until we cross over those dual carriageways is an uphill gradient, and I was really feeling it at this point and wondering if I really had gone out too fast and I was going to blow up. As I made it back to the high point of the run as we crossed over these dual carriageways on the edge of Bristol, my pace had slowed to around 6:18 per kilometre. Still below my target pace of 6:23 per kilometre, but I really was starting to feel it as I'd had that uphill gradient for around 5 kilometres. But I now had some downhill to enjoy as I made my way the next 15 kilometres on a slightly downhill gradient back towards Bath. Back at Bitton Station, I hit a rather large landmark, 32 kilometres or 20 miles into this marathon. And from what I've read before I ran this marathon, as I've never ran one before, people say that 20 miles or 32 kilometres is really the halfway point. This is where you'll really start to suffer. And I can attest that that is true. A passing steam train did boost my spirits as I made my way down the final part of the Avon and Somerset Railway. But there was no denying I really was starting to suffer at this point. I hadn't hit the wall. I think I still had some energy, but my body was just in pain. My muscles were highly fatigued and really struggling to put out the power needed to keep up a decent pace. And this final 10k is where I'd suffered the most, and my pace started to drop dramatically. I'm very proud of the fact that I didn't walk on this marathon, but the final 10k my kilometres dropped for an average of around 6:20 per kilometre, to the point where each kilometre was taking me over 7 minutes on average. I struggled my way through to the 37 kilometre point, where here as I crossed over the River Avon was a feed station, and I remember saying to them, "I'm so glad to see you." I took in some drink and took a handful of sweets and carried on for the final 5k, just a park run to go, and that did give me some motivation to fight through the pain and carry on running to the final part of this marathon. As I came into Bath and left the railway path and headed down that short 500 metre stretch of road, my watch ticked over to 40 kilometres, only 2.2 kilometres to go, and I remember looking at my watch and almost shedding a tear. I was so happy that I'd hit 40 kilometres, and the fact that the terrain had changed, I'd left the railway path and was now coming on to the riverside path, all told me that this was almost over, and it was really hurting by this point. My body was in tatters, so I was so happy to be here. Just 2k to go. With around 1 kilometre to go, I passed the final race photographer, and you might think I look quite happy here, but let's zoom in a little bit. That is the face of someone in pain, putting on a brave face for the camera, and I really was in pain at this point, and really looking forward to crossing that finish line. With around 100 metres to go, I had to make my final left turn into Green Park and head to the finish line, where I used every little bit of strength I had left to do somewhat of a sprint finish and look happy as I crossed the line. And what an incredible feeling that was, to complete my first marathon. Look how happy I was. I was just overjoyed that I could stop running after 4 hours and 41 minutes. So I was below my target time. I dropped to an average pace of around 6:40 per kilometre, with that last 10k really dragging it down. But it's still a time that I'm incredibly proud of. So that's it, marathon completed. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll leave you to enjoy this bird's eye view of the route with a few pictures along the way.